The prison yard at Rossmore State is full of noise and chaos. A big fight breaks out. John punches first and makes someone bleed. Nelson doesn't back off. He pulls out a screwdriver, but his cellmate is even more prepared. He lifts his shirt and shows sharp homemade knives strapped to his belly. He quickly throws one of the knives at Bierman, but Bierman ducks, and the blade misses. Then the fight gets worse. They charge at each other and fall to the ground. It's no longer just punching. Now they're rolling on the ground, trying to beat each other. Lashitzky grabs the knife and stabs the other guy, but the blade breaks in half. Turns out the guy had hidden metal license plates under his prison uniform to protect himself. Even John, who has seen many fights, is surprised. That's smart, he says. In the middle of this madness, one name stands out: John Lashitzky. He's been in and out of prison his whole life. His story starts when he is just 8 years old. Back then, he stole a prize van from Publishers Clearinghouse. He even walked into a bank with a huge check, thinking it was funny. But the police caught him quickly. They took him to court where he met Judge Nelson Bierman III, someone he would see many more times in life. The judge found him guilty and sent him to juvenile prison for 7 years. He even told Lashitzky that he was a waste of space. That moment was just the beginning of his long journey in and out of jail. Years later, when Lashitzky is an adult, he gets out of prison, but he doesn't learn from his past. He tries to rob 2 police officers and misses both shots. Of course, he's arrested again, and guess what? He ends up in the same courtroom with the same judge, and the judge gives him the same kind of speech before sending him back to prison. By the time he turns 24, Lashitzky gets out again. This time he only lasts 6 months before he steals a car. Once again, the same judge, the same courtroom, and the same lecture. This time about car theft. No matter what he does, he keeps ending up in the same place. This time, Lashitzky has a plan after getting out. He doesn't mind going back to prison, but first he wants to settle the score with the old judge. He calls the courthouse, pretending to be someone interested in sitting in on a case. That's when they tell him, Judge Bierman is gone. Not retired, he's dead. Lashitzky almost crushes the phone in his hand. If he had gotten out a few days earlier, maybe he could have stopped something. But now, it's too late. Frustrated, he fires a few shots into the phone booth and walks off to a bar to cool down. At the bar, he spots a newspaper story about the late judge's son, Nelson Bierman IV. Right then, Lashitzky decides if he can't get the father, the son will do. He shows up at the Bierman Foundation event honoring the late judge. Nelson IV steps on stage and delivers a stiff speech about legacy and justice. People stare, feeling like they're watching a strange commercial. Lashitzky sneaks into Nelson's car later and causes a mess. Nelson drives off to his office with some important people waiting for him, unaware his drink tastes off because it's been spiked. Still on the phone, ranting with the speaker on, Nelson doesn't realize the man driving next to him is the same one who laced his drink, waiting for round 2. Nelson's asthma flares up. He reaches for his inhaler, only to find it empty. John emptied it earlier at the event. Panic hits. Nelson gasps for air, swerves into a pharmacy parking lot, and stumbles inside. An elderly couple behind the counter assumes they're being robbed, and a bad robbery at that. Nelson knocks over shelves, sending boxes flying, but finally grabs one inhaler. He lifts it, trying to show he means no harm. Just then, John fires a warning shot outside. The old man hears it, sees Nelson holding something, thinks it's a gun, and hits the panic button. The old lady fires. Game over. Mission complete. The judge's golden boy faces armed robbery charges. Now locked up, Nelson yells at his lawyer, Dwayne, but the security footage clearly shows him ransacking the pharmacy. His best move is pleading guilty to get a lighter sentence. Worst of all, he must step down as chairman of the Bierman Foundation. Dwayne calls a board meeting on speakerphone. Someone suggests asking the governor for a favor, but Dwayne shuts it down fast. Everyone agrees it's better to give Nelson a break, so the attorney takes over. In court, Nelson tries to charm Judge Eva before trial, flaunting his connections and status. She's having none of it. She tells him to sit and wait like everyone else. People like you make me sick. I don't want your Drakkar Noir stinking up my courtroom. Prosecution, present your case. The trial begins with a jury that looks randomly picked at 12 people who seem clueless but excited to be there. The prosecution plays the video. Nelson's lawyer gets up and awkwardly mumbles something about Jurassic Park. No context, no link, just a random movie reference that confuses everyone, including Nelson. That's the end. They find him guilty of felony assault. Judge Eva sentences him to 3 to 5 years in Rossmore State Penitentiary. John watches quietly as Nelson walks the same path his father walked over and over. He cheers from the back, but deep down, it doesn't feel like enough. Later, John sits around with his crew, puffing on a cigarette, clearly restless. One of them jokes about using some kind of magic potion to feel better, but John wants something more. That's when two guys knock on the door, pretending to want some action. John knows right away they're undercover cops. Still, he lets them in and makes the deal. As soon as they leave, he tells everyone to bounce. He already knows what's coming. Getting busted is part of his plan. He wants to go back to prison. In court, he doesn't bother with the drama. He pleads guilty and even asks to be sent to Rossmore. The judge doesn't waste time. He grants the request, slams the gavel, and it's done. Meanwhile, Nelson, still in holding, ends up on the same prison bus as John. The ride is awkward, but John breaks the tension, cracks jokes, and even says he hopes they're bunkmates. "I don't snore," he adds, "and I'm a quiet masturbator. Hell, I'll give you top bunk." At Rossmore, the fresh inmates gather for a cold welcome speech from the warden. It's dry, heartless, and basically tells them to shut up and deal with it. John, who's already pulled some strings behind the scenes, lands a cell with Nelson. To him, this is the dream. Front row access to mess with Bierman the Fourth every single day. When they step into their cell, the spoiled rich kid takes one look at the disgusting toilet and instantly breaks down. John, who's been through this too many times, tells him to quit crying. If he doesn't toughen up, he's gonna get crushed. Nelson tries to act brave, but it's so bad that even John and another guy walking by burst out laughing. That's the start of Bierman's prison life. For John, it's just another regular day. During lunch, they head to the cafeteria, and John starts dropping random prison facts like fun trivia. He points out Leonard, a gang boss from the White Kingdom. When Nelson asks how John knows all this, John just shrugs and says, "It's all in the mail. If it matters, it finds me." Things get intense when John tells Nelson to stand up at exactly 11:45. But instead, Nelson rambles on about some high school memory. Right then, Leonard jumps another inmate, slams him onto their table, and stabs him. John slides out of danger like a pro. Nelson just freezes, panicked. John gives him a silent cue to point out the attacker, and he does. When the guards rush in, Nelson instantly earns a spot on Leonard's enemy list. Back in the cell, John lays into him. Even though it was his idea, he warns Nelson that in prison, survival means learning fast and trusting no one. Later in the showers, Barry, a massive hairy guy and boss of the G-Lords, strolls up, eyeing Nelson like fresh meat. But John steps in. He claims Nelson as his property and warns Barry's crew to back off. Then, to make it clear, he shoves a hand down Nelson's pants. It's not about intimacy, it's prison politics. A few days later, Nelson gets a visit from Dwayne. He tries to talk his way out of prison, but Dwayne shuts it down. Without his position at the Bierman Foundation, Nelson has no pull, no power, and no money. The lawyer throws a few jabs, but reins it in just in time. He even taunts him with his favorite drink, a cold Fresca. Meanwhile, John is turning Nelson's sentence into a living nightmare, from paying a neighbor to punch him every other day to messing with his meals, like sliding a used rubber into his food tray. John makes sure Nelson never forgets where he is. Back in the bathroom, Nelson sits in a corner, legs crossed, filing his nails like he's in a spa. Barry shows up again. This time he wants in. John doesn't stop him but names his price: half an ounce of weed and 4 packs of smokes. Barry agrees. Earlier, John had already worked out the plan with Officer Shanahan. He had the guard call in a fake request that left their cell door open while Nelson was alone. Nelson panics, but John tells him to chill. Seconds later, the G-Lords snatch him, bag his head, and drag him to Barry's cell. Barry greets him with a disgusting toilet drink and starts making small talk like they're old buddies. Nelson is terrified, barely breathing. Barry doesn't touch him. Not yet. Instead, he leans in and whispers that tonight's not the night. Like some twisted date, he tells Nelson he's not rushing things. Then he leans in closer and asks for an Eskimo kiss. Trembling, Nelson goes along just to survive. Barry lets him go, but not before making one thing clear. From now on, he can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. Nelson picks up a new habit, writing down everything he's been through. He's sitting on the floor with his back against the cold prison bars, scribbling in his notebook. Out of nowhere, one of Leonard's guys walks over and straight up pees on the pages. No sorry, no explanation, just a warning. Leonard's getting out of solitary soon, and when he does, things are going to get ugly. Back in the cell, John doesn't sugarcoat it. Leonard's not the kind of guy to kill fast. He'll make it slow, beat him down over and over, drag it out for months, then maybe end it when he's bored. Things heat up in the cafeteria. John casually mentions that even Officer Shanahan is taking bets on when and how Nelson will go down, but for some reason, Nelson thinks it's a smart idea to go talk to Leonard himself. John surprisingly doesn't stop him, maybe just to see what happens. So Nelson walks up to Leonard's table and tries to give a serious, heartfelt speech. He barely gets a few sentences in before Leonard calmly stabs a fork into his leg, right above the knee. Then, without a word, he grabs another fork and does the same to the other leg. While Nelson hunches over, holding back tears, he still hopes this brave move earns him a break. Leonard looks at him and says it took guts to come over. The only other guy who ever tried that was his dad, and he ended up killing him. So yeah, Nelson's still on the hit list, but at least he bought himself some time. He pulls the forks out on his own and limps away. Back at the table, he tells John, "My execution's been postponed." Unaware that John's already signaling Shanahan, the odds just shifted. Later in the cell, John lays out his options: give up and wait to die, fight Leonard, or apply for a private cell. Nelson likes that last one, but before he can ask how, John suddenly tosses a ball to distract a guard, ducks behind him, and punches him in the face. That move earns Nelson a one-way ticket to solitary. 2 days in the hole, and it messes him up. No windows, no sense of time, just his own thoughts going in circles. When the guards finally pull him out, he's shaken, drained, and convinced he won't survive this place. Out in the yard, he finds one of the regulars, a low-key hustler who runs a little black market operation. The guy says he's got something for every kind of pain. Nelson doesn't ask for details. He just says he wants out. Not an escape, just something to quiet everything. The guy thinks, then pulls out a bottle labeled for boat cleaning and tells him it'll do the trick. Later in the cell, John sees Leonard's gang heading over, and he dips without a word. The crew comes in, but Leonard tells them to wait outside. He wants this one-on-one. He starts swinging, but Nelson doesn't freeze this time. He blocks some punches, throws a few back, then climbs the top bunk and starts kicking from above. It works for a second. Leonard powers through and gears up to end it. That's when a syringe falls off the bunk. It's already filled, and with the same boat cleaner from earlier. Leonard sees it, asks what it is, and Nelson makes up a name that sounds like a drug. John had warned not to touch it, but Leonard doesn't listen. He jabs it into his arm, and just like that, he drops dead. Outside the cell, the gang goes silent. Nelson drags Leonard's body out, looking like he just earned his place. The rest of the gang backs off. John returns, pretending to be impressed, but quickly reminds him, killing someone inside could mean 20 more years on your sentence. Nelson smiles and says, "I didn't kill anyone." He holds up the same syringe Leonard used on himself. That's when John slips. Says something that sounds like he had a bigger plan in mind. Nelson catches it and asks, "What did you just say?" But John plays it off, brushing it away. Later in the canteen, Nelson walks in with John, and the whole place quiets down. One of the White Kingdom guys walks up behind him. Nelson turns fast with a fork ready to strike. But the guy isn't here to fight. He's offering peace. Leonard wasn't popular with the rest of the crew, and now they're showing respect. John watches in disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. To prove it's real, John tells another inmate to give up his seat for the new boss. The guy gets up, and Nelson throws in a few cocky insults just for fun. The inmate walks off without a word. That moment hits different. Nelson feels the power shift, but John, he realizes the setup just backfired. Later, the boss heads to the bathroom to pee, and, surprise, Barry shows up again, still acting like they're in a relationship. As always, Barry leans in, trying his usual flirty moves, but this time the guy's had enough. He shoves Barry hard and lands 2 solid punches to his face. That's when Barry snaps. He grabs the guy by the neck and starts choking him. But Nelson manages to calm him down, playing on whatever feelings Barry still believes they have. Barry loosens up. Nelson even opens his arms, offering a hug. Barry softens instantly, stepping in for it. But before they can even touch, the White Kingdom storms in. They've been keeping an eye on everything, and now they pile on Barry. The boss yells at them to stop, but it's too late. When the guards arrive and see the chaos, they don't ask questions. They spot John standing nearby and instantly assume he's behind it. And just like that, John gets thrown into solitary. By the time John gets out, the prison has flipped. Nelson's now the star of the yard. He's teaching karate, cracking jokes in front of a crowd, and even running the prison's theater group with Lashitzky. One day, Nelson gives this cheesy little speech about how much he's learned and how grateful he is for his cellmate. That sets John off. Once he's alone, he loses it, kicking the bed, smashing everything in sight. This is not what he traded his freedom for. Meanwhile, Nelson and Barry are tight now. Too tight. Barry even suggests they drink toilet wine and beat up a newbie. Standard Barry bonding stuff. But Nelson isn't into it. Barry doesn't take rejection well and starts whining, saying Nelson never wants to hang out anymore. Later, John walks into Barry's cell holding a can of Fresca and a farewell speech. He says he's proud of Nelson's growth and hopes his upcoming hearing goes well. Calls it a gift from an old friend. The can is already open, which makes Nelson suspicious. John plays innocent, saying he'd never poison him. He even takes a sip to prove it's safe. Then guilt-tripping him, he says, "How could you even think that of me?" Nelson buys it and drinks the whole thing. Big mistake. It's drugged. Moments later, he's unconscious. John, staying calm, forces himself to vomit and purges the poison from his own system. Then he quietly signals the next part of his plan. Next morning, Nelson is taken to court for his early release hearing. He stands there trying to convince them he's changed. But the moment he looks up, the courtroom gasps. There's a huge offensive tattoo across his forehead, thanks to John. Nelson didn't even know. The panel stares in disbelief. His words fall flat. Just based on his appearance, they deny his request and decide he should serve his full sentence. He returns to the cell burning with rage. The moment he steps in, he charges at John. They throw punches until John gets the upper hand and slams him against the bars. That's when John reveals the truth. He knew Judge Bierman, and he hated him for always sending him to prison. That's why he targeted the judge's son. But Nelson isn't down yet. He breaks free, flips John over, and smashes his head against the metal bunk. That's when Shanahan storms in, back up in tow. But instead of shutting things down, the senior officer smirks and books a match. Not just any fight, a one-round, no-rules bloodbath. Winner gets a bullet prize. Translation, someone's getting a body bag souvenir. From that moment on, guards are glued to them 24/7, just to make sure they don't kill each other before fight night. The betting frenzy begins. Officers, inmates, everyone's got cash riding on this brutal showdown. Even the warden hears whispers, though nothing official. Meanwhile, John basks in the chaos, his revenge plan unfolding perfectly. Only one hiccup, he still has to share a cell with his target. Then comes visiting hour, and guess who walks in? Barry. Yep, the big guy's out. But freedom tastes bland without his baby. He admits he's been tempted to catch another charge just to get back inside. The visit turns emotional. Well, at least for Nelson, who calls Barry the closest thing to family. Barry swears he'd do anything for him. Perfect, because Nelson's got a little mission for him. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Dwayne's relaxing in his office, casually putting golf balls when the phone rings. It's the judge's son. He wants out, but Dwayne shuts him down fast. He's got 0 legal moves left. That's when the guy reveals a twist. Under the Foundation's rules, the chairman's seat can go to his son if Nelson's unfit. And guess what? He just adopted someone new. Enter Barry, all 300 pounds of pure chaos, busting into the office and throwing Dwayne out. Why? Because he's now the legal chairman of the Bierman Foundation. Surprise. Back at the prison, the warden pulls Shanahan aside. No jokes this time, just a serious wager. He's in too. Fight night arrives. John's on top of his opponent and suddenly wipes part of his shirt, drenched in industrial cleaner, across the guy's face. That tiny move throws him off. John lands a few vicious kicks. Then, in a wild turn, both whip out syringes, each scrambling to stab the other. Suddenly, Bierman stops. He offers a draw, saying he's learned one thing behind bars: never trust anybody. He then lunges and stabs Litsky with the syringe, but Litsky jabs him at the same time. They both drop like sacks of bricks, motionless. Shanahan fires a warning shot to disperse the crowd. Medics rush in, check their vitals, and call it both dead. Cut to a gloomy graveyard. The Bierman Foundation officially hands over control to Nelson's only surviving son, Barry. But after the mourners leave, Barry gets digging, and out comes Nelson, alive and very much breathing. Plot twist? You bet. Turns out once Shanahan told them this story was ending in death no matter what, Nelson paid a little visit to a sketchy supplier and got his hands on a chemical that knocks a man out for 3 full days. That's what they injected. The med staff? Paid off by Barry. Everything had been staged to perfection. At the second grave, Nelson stares down, debating whether to leave his old cellmate buried forever. But Barry, the soft-hearted giant, reminds him not to poke karma. After some back and forth, the two shake hands. Their feud? Buried for good. Flash forward 1 year. The trio now runs Baby Duck Wine, a drink so bad it's almost a crime. At a wine expo, one judge is seconds away from spitting it out and torching their rating, until Ken, formerly John, strolls in with 2 ex-inmates glaring from the back. That's all it takes. Everyone forces a sip, cringes, nods politely through the pain, but that's alright. Nelson, John, and Barry. They're rich, free, and finally living their twisted version of happily ever after.